Welcome to the Catholic Audio Media Podcast here on your favorite podcast platform. And of course, we are here every single Monday through Friday. And our program actually drops right after midnight, usually around midnight 01. So you can hear the program anytime. And you can hear it anytime, actually, because it stays on the internet for quite a long time. I don't know any program that I've taken off the internet. So for years, we can say that. So the program is here. And we appreciate that you are with us listening to these programs. And please pass the word. Let other people know. Especially, we seem to have a good, positive response to our new format. So that's important as well. Well, and anyway, we are in a new day. And remember, we've been following along on Exodus, and supposedly the climax was going to be today. But we have a feast today, so we're not going to continue that reading. We're going to go back to it on Monday. But today would have most likely, as I follow the pattern along, been the day that we focus on the Ten Commandments. However, today is the feast day of St. James, the Apostle. And this is one of those mysterious days. Why did people do this? It's it's nothing big. It's not like it's going to change your life. But James, of course, wrote the letter of James in the New Testament. Yet our first reading is from Corinthians. You would think it would be from James. Because, again, it's not following along the continuity. We'd be reading from Exodus if that was the case. But it is following along in the feast, so the reading changes. Why aren't we reading from James? I don't know. I didn't have anything to do with those decisions. But in any case, we are looking at 2 Corinthians. But before that we do that, let's look at the letter of James. One of the kind of a funny side stories about that is, they used to say, never say anything. This is one of the rules that we had growing up. Never say any word. In other words, don't say bad, foul language. Any word that is not in the Bible. Well, therefore, you can call anyone you want an ignoramus because that word is in the Bible. And it's in the letter of James. And in James, he uses the word to describe others. So let's kind of give you the context of that. So what we can see here is in the New American Bible Revised Edition, this is the part where St. James is talking about the importance of understanding that faith without works is dead. So the passage that in the New American Bible Revised Edition uses the term ignoramus, and that is where he talks about how even demons believe and they tremble and, you ignoramus. Well, in other versions, it may not be there. In the Revised Standard Version, it calls him, you shallow man. I like ignoramus better. I'm sorry, I really do. Ignoramus, actually, I think would lean more towards you ignorant clown as opposed to you shallow man. But in any case, it's an important discussion because when we're looking at the story of St. James, we're also looking at a story of, a letter that Martin Luther hated. He really considered it a straw epistle. And the reason why he hated, I don't know if hate is a bit of a strong word, but he didn't like it, because of this passage of faith and works. Now, what was he really talking about? Well, it's simply this. Our faith needs to produce works, but we don't earn our faith or our salvation through works. So you always hear people saying, I'm good enough to get to heaven. Well, first of all, you're not. But secondly, it's irrelevant. You don't earn your way to heaven. But our faith is something that inspires our works. So, for example, if we're actually believing in the Lord and we're acting on his teaching, then we will, because of our belief in God and our love of God, we will act that way. Let me give you an example, which I always like to do. I'm no longer surrounded by Harvard University because I now live in Brockton, although I'm right across the street from Massasoit Community College. So we can still use the college, I guess. But in any case, if we take from MIT or Harvard or any other school the physics department, and we take some of the rules. Now, if you do not believe, we'll put it this way, you don't believe in the laws of physics. For some reason, you're just some person's, it's just some conspiracy theory. There's no such thing as the laws of physics. There's just some conspiracy theory. Okay, you want to believe that? I mean, there are people that believe similar things. Man didn't land on the moon. It was Stanley Kubrick who actually did all that in a Hollywood studio. Are you kidding me? There are even prominent rebellious Catholics who teach that, who weren't even old enough to be, which I am, to be alive during the moon landing, but they will say, no, it was all a conspiracy theory by Stanley Kubrick. Do you ever watch a Stanley Kubrick movie? There is no way Stanley Kubrick would have copied or done the moon landing, because then there'd be a monster on there, there'd be something bizarre that they would find there, whatever. You know, I've told you I love the book The Shining. Never liked the movie. Movie never made sense to me. So in any case, we'll talk. And let's not talk about 2001: A Space Odyssey. A fascinating movie. Cinematography was absolutely outstanding. I had to read the book by Arthur C. Clarke, which was actually based on the movie, but the movie is based, here is circular reasoning, but it's real. The movie is based on his script, and then I had to read the book in Peru, of all places, which helped me to understand his movie. So it's Kubrick's movie. So in any case, to actually understand what in the world was that movie about. So Stanley Kubrick was the one who did the moon landing in a Hollywood set, not in a million years. Sorry, no, it was all real. And this is around the time, by the way, it was actually earlier this week that the moon landing is recognized, the anniversary of the moon landing. But in any case, so we're looking at these words, the faith and works. And I talked about the laws of physics. And so let me explain what my point was. If you do not believe in the laws of physics because you believe it's all some conspiracy theory, and you decide to, one of the ways that you may manifest your lack of belief in the laws of physics, which probably will lead you to be alive for about 10 minutes, but we'll continue that, is you will not obey the laws of physics because you don't believe in them in the first place. So you may run through a red light. Now, there are the civil laws that say you have to stop at a red light. But again, I use this example all the time. No one's around. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. Why am I stopped here? No one's going to catch me. And there is no such thing as the laws of physics. So your action is based on your belief, and you do not believe there is the laws of physics. So you go through the red light, don't see this car coming, and you discover, whoa, the laws of physics are real, as you find yourself on your way to your eternal disposition, right? Do you understand? So whether you believe in the laws of physics is irrelevant to a point, but if you believe in the laws of physics, you will act on the laws of physics. If you believe in everything that we teach as Catholics, you will act on that. But you need to understand it within the context. And what's the prime thing that we believe? that Jesus does everything he can that you can be saved. That's the prime step. That's what it's all about. That's what we believe in. Jesus does everything so that you can be saved. So, when you understand that and you understand that reality, you're going to act on it. And this is what St. James is talking about. He's talking about we believe in God, therefore we will act on our faith. Now, one of the ways that we can act on our faith is to attend Mass. That's absolutely key. We attend Mass because that shows that we believe, but that's not the only reason why we attend Mass. Nor do we attend Mass only for the fact that it's an obligation. Then we're really at a minimum standard. We attend Mass because we believe and we are in union with Christ and we seek Christ. Okay, that's why we attend Mass, and also it's an obligation. But it goes back to the red light theory. Why do you stop at the red light? Well, it's the law. Well, yes, but there's another reason. Because if you don't believe in the law, if you don't follow the laws of physics, which are unbreakable, not unbreakable, but you cannot ignore them, will take over. And then you've got a problem. So do you see what I'm saying? So we act on what we believe. That's what St. James is talking about. So if you just say, I believe in the laws of physics, well, why did you go through the red light at 3 o'clock in the morning? Wow, it doesn't work at 3 o'clock in the morning. The laws of physics, they get shut off at midnight. Okay, you want to believe that. You just go ahead and believe that. That's absolutely crazy. Well, there you go. The fact is, you act on your beliefs. And that's what St. James is talking about. One of my favorite stories in regards to that is Pastor D. James Kennedy did a whole homily or whole sermon on the radio from Coral Gables Ministries. Coral Gables Ministries? In Florida. And he gave a whole teaching on this. Now, what's important about D. James Kennedy, I've talked about this on the radio show and the previous manifestation of the podcast, is he hated Catholics. He didn't hate Catholics. He hated the Catholic Church. He considered it a system. But when he gave a teaching on this passage, which, remember, Martin Luther despised this passage especially, so much so he didn't like the letter of James. Nothing he said we disagree with. We'll be right back right after this. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. And don't forget, through the month of July, if you sign up, then if I decide to charge for a special subscription rate for maybe being able to comment or make comments or suggestions, whatever the case may be, I will not charge you, because you came in on the ground floor during the month of July. That's July, right up until July 31st. Now, granted, I may not charge at all, but it would be just a way to help support the ministry. And it would be, people would have access to our stuff no matter what. But if they want to make a comment or anything, that because then you'd be acting as a assistant producer. Maybe we'll call it that. I don't know. But in any case, just so you know. Well, we are continuing to look at this whole focus on James because today is the Feast of James. So he understood that reality of that our faith must be manifest in our works. So if I believe, but I don't act on my belief, and you meet people like that all the time. I always love to tell the story when I was in the Navy of the shipmate of mine, friend of mine, I guess you could say too. He was a good guy, who he was of that form of Christianity that if you say the sinner's prayer, you are saved. Therefore, how your life is after that doesn't have to match your belief, so to speak. So anyway, he borrowed my car for the day. And I let him borrow my car, obviously. And when he went to pick me up at the end of the day, he said, now don't get upset. Now I'm now in the driver's side. And I said, why would I get upset? He said, of course, I suppose I should have been thinking, well, he dented my car, which looked fine. Whatever. And I had an interesting car. I can tell you about that in a minute. What he said was, now don't get upset. You have a gun under your seat. Okay, I am not upset. Why do I have a gun under my seat? And he used it because he carried it just in case he needed to protect himself. Well, obviously, if you know anything about me, I too am a veteran. Obviously, we were shipmates. I'm a veteran. I refuse to own guns. I refuse to own guns for the exact same reason that Abraham Lincoln refused to own guns. He said he'd use it. It's really simple. Why won't I use a gun? I would use it. Why would I use it? Well, why would I have a gun if I don't plan to use it? And of course, we were trained in the Navy that if you have, when you were carrying a weapon and you removed it from the holster, you had to use it. So the only reason why you should ever remove a weapon from the holster is that you plan to use it. Is that you're going to use it, not plan to, is that you're going to use it. So, am I ever going to use a gun? No. But Father, you might be in a situation where you need a gun. No, I never will. Well, how can you say that? Well, it's really simple. Again, based on my faith. Faith without works is dead. I have no intention of using a gun and having to explain to the Lord why I used the gun and killed someone. Very simple. There it is right there. All that. Well, what if nothing? I just don't. That's the reason why. And it's because of my Catholic faith that I use a gun. I won't use a gun. Now, if by chance, I don't even own one. If by chance I wasn't Catholic, if I was back in my atheist days, I think things would be different. I don't know. But I do know that there it is. That's my faith influencing my works. I will not own a gun. But anyway, it was an interesting story. So when we finally got to his house and I went to drop him off and I got out of the car, he ran over to the driver's side, reached under the seat. I never saw the gun. And pulled it out and then went into his house. And, obviously said goodbye and all the other things, but he wanted to get the gun out of my car, which is what exactly I wanted at the time because he carried a gun in my car. But in any case, that's the reality. It's he was an example of someone who lived his faith differently than I certainly would. And he said very clear, I believe that once you say the sinner's prayer, you are saved. Therefore, it doesn't matter how you live after that. That's what St. James is speaking out against. Your faith and your works must be connected. If you believe, then you will act on your belief. If you don't believe, then you will not act on your belief. Now, one of the most obvious things is going to church, right? Now, notice what I said. One of the most obvious things is going to church, okay? One of the most obvious things is going to church. Therefore, I didn't say anything about putting any money in the collection. No. Obviously, you want to support your local parish. But, anyone who says, well, I believe, but I don't have to act on my belief, that's the point where St. James would say, what are you, an ignoramus? That's not how St. James talked. Besides the fact he didn't speak English. But do you see that? Your faith and your works should match. Your faith should influence your works. And part of that is going to church on Sunday. There you go. I believe. Why do I believe? Because I'm going to church on Sunday. You probably heard that ancient story. It's one of those stories that is part of a collection of stories, not like from a book collection, just people like, kind of parables people tell that we don't know the origin, kind of like a folklore or whatever, of the man who is playing cards on a Sunday morning, and he's an atheist, but one of the guys playing cards is a Catholic. And the atheist looks at the Catholic and says, why are you here playing cards? Shouldn't you be in church? And I don't have to go to church, the whole bit. He says, wait a minute. Aren't you a Catholic? Yeah. He says, well, don't you believe that Jesus is present in the body and blood of Christ, which is in the tabernacle? So Jesus is present in the tabernacle, as the story goes. And the man says, well, yeah. He says, look, I'm an atheist. If I actually believed that God himself was in the tabernacle, was in that church, I would approach that church on my hands and my knees. So again, it reflects an understanding of how our faith should influence our works. Now, that doesn't mean that we should be walking into church on our hands and knees. I'm not saying that. And that wasn't the point of the story, but the point of the story is if you're not even walking into the church, but you say you believe, St. James would say, do you really believe? Do you really believe? Well, of course I believe. I believe that Jesus is the Son of God and he died in the cross. Well, why don't you go to church on Sunday? Well, because I have more important things to do. Then St. James would say, you ignoramus, you don't believe at all. That's what he would say. So you notice I've been using that word a lot. Now, apparently, it's only in the New American Bible Revised Edition. Like I said, the Revised Standard Version says, you shallow man. And there's another version over here, too. Let me see if I can find it. But anyway, yeah. You shallow man. What's another word that's here? Well, anyway, let me see if I can find that. Well, anyway, it's in the New American Bible Revised Edition. But what is it saying? He's using that word to describe people who claim to believe but don't. And this was the contention with Martin Luther. Now, obviously, Martin Luther believed, but let's add to this. Martin Luther believed, and he acted on his beliefs, and his beliefs were in collision, were in rebellion with the Catholic Church. Now, if you know anything about Martin Luther, of course, he attached the 95 Theses to the Wittenberg Cathedral. He didn't attach that as an act of rebellion. He attached that as a way to say, look, let's talk about this. But the church, now remember, I'm talking about the church. I'm not talking about you per se, and we'll talk about that in a second. The church responded as it always does, circles the wagons. Bam. Which would be interesting then, because the concept of circling the wagons did not exist in 1517. Why? Because that comes from the folklore of the Old West, which did not even exist yet, because it couldn't have existed until after 1776. Remember that. That's when the settlers slowly, actually wouldn't have existed until after the Louisiana Purchase. That's when the settlers slowly moved into the rest of the United States. And then, of course, you had the big fights with the people who were here, the Native Americans, and the big arguments. and in the battles, and they would circle the wagons as a protection. But that's back in the 1800s. We're in the 1500s. But that is the way the church would always respond, their version of circle the wagons. And what are the responses of that besides excommunicating Martin Luther instead of sitting down and having a talk? One of the responses to that was, of course, the Council of Trent. So the Council of Trent was a reaction to the Protestant Reformation. Now, with the church circling the wagons, you have Martin excommunicating Martin Luther. Martin Luther goes and spreads his message, which grows, and then you have the whole Protestant Reformation, which is growing at that time throughout Europe. So that's where it all begins, and that is him acting on his faith, and part of his faith was him disagreeing with the Roman Catholic Church. So you see all that. And then the Council of Trent comes in, and the Council of Trent, again, stepping forth from this very same principle, the Council of Trent was very strict in a lot of ways, and we're still fighting that battle today, because today's Martin Luthers are the opposite. If you think about it, the people who are what are known as vacationists. Sede vacationists. What's that mean? Well, we go on vacation, but we don't find a particular place to stay. That's a sede vacationist. A sede vacanist. Those are people who don't believe in the authority of the Pope. They believe in the authority of a previous Pope, but don't believe in the authority of the current Pope. They are called sede vacanists. And people will call them Catholic. I don't. That's obviously Protestantism. Obviously, because they reject the teaching of the church for their own teaching. It's obviously Protestantism. We are not sede vacanists because we believe in the authority of the Pope and the magisterium. So that's an important distinction as well. But all of that comes from this disagreement with this particular letter, especially this particular passage. We're going to be back right after this. You can now leave a message for us, which we can air and discuss on this program. Just call 617-297-7452. That's 617-297-7452. 617-297-7452. Feel free to call, leave a comment, a question, or even feedback, and we may play it on the air. I can discuss your comment or question as well, so give that a try. 617-297-7452, 617-297-7452. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at CatholicAudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. We're back, and do keep in mind that during the month of July, if you sign up for our Patreon, if you sign up for, as a member of our Patreon, then if I go into the charging mode, if I go into the charging mood too, I suppose, but go into the charging mode, then you won't be charged because you're on the ground floor. So just keep that in mind. And you have charging, part of the subscription model so you can make comments, suggestions, and stuff like that. So you will come in on the ground floor. So there are other words that were used instead of ignoramus. Another one is foolish. Shallow is another one. These are different versions. The King James Version says foolish. New American Bible, New American Version says foolish as well. And the Revised Standard Version says shallow. And the New Testament for Everyone says, you stupid person. Uses stupid. So in any case, There you go. You have a whole selection of words there. Don't say a word that is not in the Bible. Well, I can call someone stupid, an ignoramus, foolish, shallow, all from one verse. There you go. They used to say that to us as kids. Don't say any word that's not in the Bible. You really want to make that a rule? That may not be the rule you want to make it, because there are a lot of words in the Bible you may not want us to say. Ignoramus is one of them. We're going to be back on Monday. In the meantime, have yourself a blessed weekend, and we'll see you on Monday.